What is up, everyone? It's Quinn here, and in today's video, I'm going to be talking about the best waiver wire targets heading into week 14 of the NFL season. I'm guessing this is pretty much going to be your last week before the fantasy playoffs. Maybe you have 2 more weeks, but this is really like the last push to get into that playoff spot. We want to look at some of the best targets to help you guys win your fantasy football championships. If you guys enjoyed the video, hit that like button, subscribe. Keep in mind, these are going to be players that are rostered in 40% or fewer leagues using the ESPN waiver wire. But let's just dive right into it here. And the first player I want to talk about is Kimani Vidal, who was rostered in 10.6% of leagues. And he was someone where early on in the season, it seemed like he might have had this window where he was going to be relevant. Gus Edwards, struggled early on, then goes on IR. You have J.K. Dobbins ahead of him, who, despite playing super well early on in the season, and, pretty much, through, week 12, he obviously has a very extensive injury history. And so there was a real chance that Kimani Vidal could step in, end up being like the Dobbins handcuff, and become super valuable. I guess, unfortunately for Vidal, nothing really happened during that stretch where he was the running back 2. Gus Edwards comes back, and all of a sudden Vidal is, back to being a non-factor. But now we have J.K. Dobbins going on IR, and I think the week 13 usage was pretty interesting. Gus Edwards, I guess unsurprisingly, led in snaps, routes, targets, and carries. You had Hassan Haskins, who came in for one single play or had one single touch. On his first carry, he fumbled, didn't get another opportunity. And then you had Vidal, who saw 4 carries for 20 yards, didn't get an insane number of snaps or routes, but at least, he had solid production in his 4 carries. I think the bet here for Kimani Vidal is at the very least, he is a Gus Edwards handcuff. If Gus Edwards goes down, Vidal, theoretically would step in to be the running back 1. But I also think there's a chance here that Vidal just overtakes Gus Edwards. Gus Edwards has not been good on the season. He is the 4th lowest rushing yards over expected per attempt. I do think we could see Vidal eat into his workload. We know this is a team that wants to run the ball. Maybe they cool off on that a little bit with the injury to J.K. Dobbins, but I think Vidal is like in that current handcuff situation, but also just has some upside of just overtaking this backfield. Now, who knows? Maybe in a few weeks, Dobbins is back, but he has a couple weeks here, to figure some things out, kind of gain ground here, and, who knows how Dobbins' recovery goes. The next running back here is going to be Blake Corum, who is rostered in 14.2% of leagues. And every week I've been talking about Blake Corum as like a handcuff pickup. And, over the last few weeks, I've started to mention how Kyren Williams had started to struggle and basically posed the idea of, does it make sense for Sean McVay and the Rams to just force feed Kyren Williams if the results aren't there, if he's having fumbling issues, when you have this day 2 running back pick? Not saying that Corum would become the new workhorse, but would it make more sense to kind of split the carries instead of force feeding, an inefficient Kyren Williams? And we actually saw a little bit of a shakeup here in week 13. Blake Corum had 8 carries for 42 yards. The problem, I guess, for Blake Corum is that Kyren still had a very impressive day. So even though Corum, was efficient with his opportunities, it's not like that was coupled with a really bad Kyren Williams game. So at this point, I still think he is just a handcuff, but definitely probably the most valuable handcuff out there. Now we're going to talk about a couple of wide receivers. I think at this point, the wide receiver pool is probably pretty picked through, on your waiver wire. Not a lot of guys sitting out there who can plug and play into your lineup, but one of them does play tonight, and that is Devaughn Vele, who was rostered in 6% of leagues, and he has really started to build on some solid performances in 3 straight games. Week 10, he went 4 for 39 and a touchdown. Week 11, he went 4 for 66. And then week 12, he went 6 for 80. He is currently running wide receiver 2 routes behind Courtland Sutton, so he's getting starting opportunities. Bo Nix is breaking out here. Devaughn Vele could be an interesting option down the stretch. And then the other wide receiver here, I talked about him last week. He continues to go on one of the craziest runs I can remember. It is Nick Westbrook-Ikhine, who was rostered in just under 20% of leagues in his first 4 games this season. He was not targeted a single time. 0 targets, 0 receptions. He has put up 8 touchdowns in the last 8 games. And what's even crazier about that is he has 8 touchdowns on only 20 receptions. 40% of his catches this year have resulted in a touchdown. He has put up 11 plus PPR points in 5 of his last 6 games. Here's the problem here with Nick Westbrook-Ikhine. This seems like a very, very, very lucky stretch here. This is not some sort of wide receiver who has great, pass production. It's not like he's playing on a super explosive passing attack where, there's just touchdowns all over the place. And so it seems like every week it's about to fall off. But we're 8 weeks into this stretch and it hasn't happened yet. All I know is, I will say this. If I rank Nick Westbrook-Ikhine in my top 40 this week, I can guarantee you that he will not be getting into the end zone. But we're kind of just at this point where if you're super desperate in the flex, 6 teams on bye, you could do worse than the guy who has scored 8 touchdowns in his last 8 games. Then we have a tight end before we dive into the handcuffs. It's Noah Gray, rostered in 7.7% of leagues. In his last 3, he has gone 4 for 23 and 2 touchdowns, 4 for 66 and 2 touchdowns. And after those 2 games, definitely seemed a little bit fluky. I mean, Travis Kelce, I think heading into this week, had 2 total touchdowns. Noah Gray had 4 in his last 2 games, and he did not get into the end zone in week 13, but still went 4 for 58. So he is making himself a factor within this offense. If you have a tight end on bye or a tight end injury, Noah Gray definitely could be a replacement option. And then, like I mentioned, the rest of these guys are going to be handcuffs, and maybe they don't seem like super exciting pickups, but these are really the guys you want to fill out your bench with at this point in the season. Like I talked about earlier on, the wide receivers out there, the majority of them aren't going to be difference makers for you. These handcuff running backs, though, they might not be playable week to week, but they have the opportunity where they are 1 injury away from potentially being like top 15 options at the position. You cannot say the same thing about these wide receivers. Unless you're in like a 6-team, 4-team league, none of the wide receivers currently on the waiver wire are going to be like top 15 options rest of season. But 1 injury, to the starting running back, these running backs could be great plays. So just going to rifle through them here. Ray Davis, rostered in 11.2% of leagues, the James Cook handcuff. We saw him get into the end zone on Sunday Night Football. Looked really good in the 1 game he had without James Cook. Cam Akers, rostered in 18.7% of leagues, the Aaron Jones handcuff. Aaron Jones had some fumbling issues. I think he got benched for a little bit in the Week 13 game, but Cam Akers still the clear handcuff there. Audric Estime, not necessarily the clear handcuff, rostered in 17.6% of leagues, but this is kind of just like a bet into the randomness of the Broncos backfield. He just went out there, was the workhorse 1 game, completely lost it the next, but who knows how that's going to, shake out rest of season. Trey Benson, rostered in 24.1% of leagues, the James Conner handcuff. Antonio Gibson, rostered in 17% of leagues. He's actually interesting because he might be able to force somewhat of a committee here. Currently the Ramondre handcuff, but on the season, he is averaging an efficient 4.7 yards per carry to Ramondre's 3.7. Gibson is top 10 in rushing yards over expected per attempt. He got the touchdown carry in week 13. So not saying he's going to overtake Ramondre, but could potentially earn a larger role here. And then maybe some of the players I didn't mention still out there, guys like Braylon Allen, players like that. The handcuffs are the guys you want to target. I will say, maybe I should have said this at the top, Jordan Mason on ESPN is rostered in just over 40% of leagues. So if he is out there, obviously he would be the priority pickup with a potential CMC season-ending injury, but didn't quite qualify for this video. If you guys enjoyed, hit that like button, subscribe. Thank you all for stopping by, and I will see you in the next one.